Okay, so I'm going to make a lidded vessel today, and so we're going to start off by making a cylinder, and the only thing different really between making a cup and a lidded vessel is that we want to leave the top of the cup a little thicker so we can create a gallery for the lid to sit in. So I'm going to throw it on a bat today. You don't have to throw it on a bat, but I'm going to throw a larger piece of clay. So I'm just going to moisten up the back of that bat, and I'm going to put it on the wheel. So this bat's a little bit smaller than the wheel head. I'll try and get it centred, and that's centred. Feels like it's sticking. Hopefully it will stay on there. All right, so I've got 1,400 grams of clay, and I have kneaded it into a spiral. It's got the spiral on the base, so I'm going to put the spiral into the base of this. Now the bat is dry, just like when we're throwing anything, we want to start with a dry base. All right, so I'm applying pressure to the top of the clay to make sure it's going to stick onto the bat to start with. So the first force is down. So I've still got the left hand on the side to create the wall, and the top hand, you can see here, is applying the force to really get that stuck onto the bat. All right, so we'll just get a bit of water. You don't want to have, you want to have enough water that it's very slippery. You don't want to have, as soon as you don't have enough water, you're going to create slurry, which is this thick, liquidy clay. And if you're throwing with just this on the surface, the clay is going to start sticking on your hands and actually pull off the pot. Makes it very difficult. Whereas if you're throwing with the water will keep the clay sliding past the hands. So I'm going to start by coning. So here, this part of the hand pushing forward, and this part of the hand here pulling toward me. And I'm anchored here. Applying pressure, squeezing that up, get a bit more water, applying more pressure, squeezing this up. So this is a fair whack of clay. Just make sure I don't get that little hole in the top there. I'm going to push that over, and that's just getting pressed down back into that clay. So all the clay platelets are actually starting to get into an alignment of this spiralling, which helps with the throwing. If you didn't knead the clay first, or if you didn't cone it while it was on the wheel, you'd probably find that you'd have less work. They will, if your throwing's not going well, I think you've either got to rethink your kneading if you're having a bad day at throwing, or the other thing you might need to think about is just your posture. Just rethink about your posture. Make sure you're not, sitting back, pulling the clay everywhere, just realign yourself. All right. So a little bit of coning there. Then we're going to get this into a dome. So if you've got this little bit here, what you can do is you can use this index finger, you can apply pressure and just slowly push the top of that dome, it's like the mushroom, over the top, and it will just nice and slowly, it will slowly push down You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to trap any air bubbles in there. And we're just getting this into a dome shape. And what we also want to consider is how big the base of this lidded jar is. So I'm sort of thinking that we'll do like a sort of a wide cylindrical jar. We might have a look at putting some shape into it. All right. So when you're centering, you have your wheel going faster. All right. And you want to be kind of careful taking your hands off once you've got it in that dome. You can knock it off centre if you take your hands off a little bit clumsily. All right, so thumbs making a little well in the middle. Let's get a bit of water in there. Going down and starting to open up. I'm going to do a flat base. So I'm thinking about how wide on the inside, because I'm throwing the inside shape, how wide do I want the inside of the vessel? So we're just going to work this base until we're happy with it. We want the all right, so we'll get it to a point. I'm going to take the excess water out. Use my needle tool. Let's see what the thickness is. It's about 12 mil. I think that's not too bad for a bigger lidded vessel. You could go down to 10 mil. So I'm just going to compress the base. So I'm going to start from the outside and bring my middle fingers. So I'm using my third and my fourth finger. Fourth finger out into the corner, sliding them across. So the wheel's spinning fast and the fingers are sliding slowly. If you want to use a tool to compress the base, you could use a wooden tool like this and use this smaller side here, holding the tool at an angle towards you using two hands. Put it in, apply a little bit of pressure. You'll get a nice, flat, compressed base. All right. So now we're going to pull the sides up. We've got a little bit more clay to play with here. We're going to work at 3 o'clock. When you're working with more clay, you can use just your fingers, or you might want to throw with the sponge. I'm going to start by just collaring it in first, just to make sure that I control that rim in case it's moving around a bit. And then I'm going to start at 3 o'clock. I've got my thumbs overlapped, third and fourth finger, 3 o'clock, applying a bit of pressure, bringing the sides up and gentle off the top. You're not moving your fingers in and out, it's just an even pressure. Let's just fix up this rim a little bit. Now, when you're pulling up if you're pulling up a taller vessel, it's good to pull it in at an angle coming towards the centre of the pot. So it's better to sort of pull in this way because you'll keep control of it. If you're pulling it out and it starts coming out, you're going to lose control of that rim, so you're going to have to collar it. So just be conscious of not letting that rim flare out too much. Okay, so starting again at 3 o'clock. Now we can slow the wheel now a little bit. Once you start working on pulling up the sides, especially as the clay gets a little bit larger, we can slow the wheel so it doesn't start wobbling around. I'll get a bit more water on this. Now, I'll just collar the top again. It's much easier for me to push the clay out than to pull it back in. So if I keep it pulled in all the time and push it out when I want to, I'll keep control of the pot. So at this stage, I've still got more clay to pull up, but I want to make sure, because I'm going to put a gallery in the top, I don't want this top to get any thinner now. So before we've been doing the pull and coming all the way off the top, but for the next couple of pulls, we're going to pull up and we're sort of going to stop that pull or the pressure here and release the pressure so that this isn't going to get any thinner. So if we're coming in, can slow the wheel a little bit, applying the pressure. So it's still applying pressure, and now I'm going to release that pressure so that we have a little bit of thickness at the top. I'll give that a little bit of a collar. I'll get a bit of water on my hands. I'll give that a bit of a collar just to and then if I press down a little bit here on the top, I'm just retaining that thickness there. All right. Take a bit of that water out from inside. Oh, that's okay. All right, I'm going to do another pull coming up. I'll just collar that in again. Now it's starting to get, there is a little bit of thinness through here now, so I'm not going to apply too much pressure through here. And yeah, so the clay has been pulled up. I can feel it. It's about 4 to 5 mils. So at this stage, I'm going to now shape the vessel how I want it shaped. So you might be making you might want a little round sort of a shape with a little lid, like a little sugar holder. You might want to think about, do you want to get your hand in here? Do you want to have, if you want a bit of body, you might put your hand in. I'm going to apply a very light pressure here, and that will start to belly out that pot a little bit. Very light pressure. And if you need to do any touching to press in with the outside hand, you can do that. Have a little look on the side. This part down here you're going to turn, so you can see on the inside what's happening there. So don't worry about that being a bit sort of thick. That has to support the rest of the pot. And once you're sort of happy with your outside shape, I might just put a little bit more of a, there we go. So now we're going to put a gallery on the inside. So a gallery is the little ledge that the lid's going to sit in. So I'll just take away any of that slurry so it's not disturbing me. And you just want to think about how you're going to hold your hands to make this shape. So look, there's always different ways of doing things, but I think if I say to you, hold your hands like this to do this, and then you're trying to think of what I've said to you, you might sort of freeze. So I think you want to look at your pot and go, okay, so I want this part here to go down, I want this rim here to stay up. How am I going to do that? I'm going to support underneath this rim with this finger here. I'm going to push down with that finger and have this finger playing a support role here. So you sort of work it out a little bit and then make sure you're anchored and see how you go. It's a very light touch. So you can see how that's actually just created a little ledge for that lid to go in. So I'm going to now come back and fix up this shape a little bit under here, applying a little bit of pressure. And then it's just a matter of finishing that off. That's going to give something for the lid to sit on. Might just pull that out a little bit there. So it's just now finishing. Now there's a little bit of a rock on that top edge, so I'm going to hold my needle at an angle, knock that off. Having a look. So I've thrown the inside shape. It's always good to have your hands touching when you're working because one is always anchored. And if the other one's not anchored, then you're anchoring it by it touching your other hand, just keeps you a bit steady. All right, so now I'm going to finish off this rim here. So using my chamois, making a small arch and very lightly placing that on that ledge, on that rim. And then we'll just play around with finishing this. Now sometimes it can take a bit of time to finish off these things. You have to do a little bit of fiddling. You don't want too many sharp edges. I think it's better to sort of try and have them a little round. If you wanted a sharper edge in this bit here, you could use a tool. You could use the right angle of this tool and you could put that in to make a more definite Okay, I'll just finish this bit off with my chamois, just using it like a little sponge. Okay, so have we got the shape that we want? Check it one more time. One more chamois of this rim. And so this becomes the bottom of a lidded vessel. So you could have a lid on this and leave it for cookies or flour or something, or you could take it further and turn it into a teapot and you could put a spout on it and a handle. So the lidded vessel is sort of the beginning of more things that you could make down the line. And so then we're ready to take this off the wheel. So we'll use this. Again, we're going to clean away the outside of that. We can cut a little bit away here. A good reason to cut away a bit is because if you've got thinness coming through here and you've got this thicker corner, you know, we don't want, if it's too thick, it's going to take a lot longer to dry, and we sort of want it all to dry kind of evenly. So we'll take away a little bit there, and that's that, and we can clean that up when we do our turning next week. Okay, lidded vessel. So now we're going to make the lid for this lidded vessel. So these are called calipers, and we can use these to measure the width of the lid. So if we take this out, open them up, and we'll get a sense of where we can sort of go to. So that's kind of the outside edge of the lid. And then you can tighten that, that's quite tight now, so that that measurement is there for you while you're making them. And we've got some room to do some turning in this gallery if we need to later on. And when we make the lid, we'll make the lid a little bit bigger because we can turn it down, but we can't make it bigger. So the lid for this little pot, it's just going to have a slight curve on it, and we can either leave some clay on the top to turn it into a knob, or we can make a knob and we can stick it on. So it could be a slab, or it could be, you know, you might put some holes in the lid and tie a stick on the top. You know, you don't have to necessarily make the lid out of, the knob out of clay. So we've got the measurement, and so we're just going to make a simple lid shape. Okay, so I've got a ball of clay here. It's been kneaded and it's in a dome, and it's got a spiral, so the spiral is going on the wheel. This is 400 grams. Now this is too much for a lid, but sometimes it's, you know, you can centre a larger block and just play with a smaller amount. You know, it can get a little bit fiddly the less clay you get. When you get smaller amounts of clay, it can get a little bit fiddly. So I'll just start by centering this piece of clay. So again, we're going to get some water on. I'm going to apply a bit of pressure to the top to get it stuck on the wheel. And now I'm going to cone that. Just get that clay all flowing in a nice little direction. Sometimes when you make lids, you might make more than one, just in case, you know, you want to make your lid at the same time that you've made your pot, because the clay is going to start shrinking. And if you make your pot and then make the lid next week, you know, it's going to have changed its size a bit. So it's good to make them together, but, you know, clay does shrink and you can run into a few measurement issues. And so sometimes it's good to make an extra lid, and then you can choose which one works the best when you make your pot. Okay. So I've got my little dome and it's centred. Now, so to make the lid, I'm actually making the lid upside down, and it's just like making a little scoop bowl, really. So it's really just like making the bowl without pulling the sides up. So I'm going to start by getting that well into the middle, bit of water. Start to pull that open. Remembering that you're throwing the inside shape, which is actually informing the outside shape. There's a couple of little air bubbles there. So I'll get the needle tool. Okay, so pulling this open. Now I've got my calipers here, which have got the size, so I can see I've got further to go. I don't need all of this thickness. And I don't want the lid to be, I want the lid to be curved, but I don't want it to be too high, so it's a gentle curve. So I'm going to just apply a bit of pressure underneath here, because that's going to start to define where I'm going to cut that off. And I'm going to just pull that out. I suppose the other thing we can think about is that as clay dries, this top section might pull in a little bit. So, you know, this is where sizes start to change a bit. So just keeping all these things in mind, that's why it's also a great reason to make an extra lid. I'm just going to flatten this out a little bit. Let's just come back and compress that base. So it's just a very small little bowl which has got a thick base here. Let's just check our size again. Okay, so we're getting pretty good with the size, but I think we might just take it slightly bigger because it's easier for us to make it smaller than make it bigger. And you don't want to have it so that there's too much room and it's wobbling around. So just going to pull that out a little bit more. All right, let's have a look. Okay, so it's just a little bit bigger. I'll just take, that's like the bit that's going to sit on the rim. Let's have one more look. All right, I think that's not too bad. It's always a bit of there's always a bit of guesswork in it. Because clay shrinks and it moves around a little bit. So now that we've got that, I'm going to just make a little mark underneath. Now, if I wanted to turn a knob onto this, then I might just take away a little bit of this excess clay. I suppose if you can always change your mind. You can always turn it off anyway if you didn't want to. Just cut a little bit more. So I hold it kind of like a pencil, this tool, and I'm just coming in at an angle. 2 hands. I don't want to leave too much clay there. All right. So now I'm just going to cut that off. I'll check it one more time before I cut it. All right. So it's about 1 millimetre bigger all the way round. So that means 2 millimetres, 1 millimetre either side. Leaves us a little bit of leeway. And then we can just slide that off. We'll let that dry and then we'll turn that little bit later. So we just put that onto our newspaper. There we go. And that's how you throw the lid. So we'll turn those next week.